Thanks everybody for joining us today. You have with us, I'm Jason Hubbard from Sales Intel. We have John M. Coe from B2B Marketing, and you're here for a webinar on ABM doesn't work without good B2B data. So excited to have everybody here today, especially excited to have John here with us. A few quick notes on John. So John is president of B2B Marketing. They're a firm that offers 6 fractional marketing services. One of those is focused on account-based marketing. That's why we've got John here with us today and excited to have him along with us. He's based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And one of the things that I love about John and that's really unique about him is he's done both sides of the sales and marketing equation, as have I. So I've got a lot of respect for anybody who's walked both sides of it. And there's a lot of insight that you get from having carried a bag as well as done the top of the funnel marketing. He's been in sales management for 4 national firms, mostly in chemical and plastics industry, and in B2B marketing for over 25 years for several direct marketing agencies such as and national campaign manager for IBM. But that's enough intro. Let me hand it over to John.
Well, thanks, Jason. It's an honor to be here. And today we're going to have some fun, hopefully, and we're going to talk about 2 big topics, ABM and B2B data. Well, actually, we're going to talk about the intersection of those 2 big topics. This is sort of the thing I've been spending a lot of time on recently. My objective for you today, in our 30, 35, or 40 minutes that we're going to spend, is to have you walk away with at least one actionable item that you do something with tomorrow, if not next week. I've often said in the seminars that I give that if you don't do anything with the information you get, then it wasn't really worth your time. This is not a rehash of ABM and why you should do it. I'm assuming that those on the phone are very familiar with ABM. You're maybe doing it or already planning it. So we're not going to go over all the ABM stuff. If you want to Google it, you can probably then read for about a week and a half of all the material on Google. It's also not a review of traditional data sources, but rather an emphasis on the data sources that work best for ABM. And that's the intersection. There'll be some old sources that you'll be familiar with and maybe some new ones. Also, after we talk about data, excuse me, we're going to have an emphasis on how to break through the clutter with ABM campaigns. The real big issue for most companies is that they're targeting new accounts that they want to break into. And the issue is, how the heck do I get somebody's attention? How do I engage and get a response? And we're going to spend some time on that. Obviously, this is not a sales pitch for our sponsor, Sales Intel, even though I have a great deal of respect for them and their data. I've used it and like it a lot, but this is not a sales pitch for them. And then following the webinar, we have a white paper that will be covering some of the stuff I'll be talking about today and some additional information. And so hopefully that will be more educational for you. Okay, next. Jason mentioned it briefly, but I just sort of thought this was funny. I saw this a couple months ago. I actually have a chemistry degree. Don't think I'm smart now. That meant I was a dropout pre-med student, so I didn't make it in pre-med, but I just finished up in chemistry. And I just thought this would be sort of a fun thing. I haven't ordered this shirt yet, but I'm planning to. Okay, next. So let's talk about ABM targeting. There's 2 sides of the targeting equation. There's the companies that you're targeting, and then there's the people within the company. Now, if you're in the ABM process right now, or you're doing ABM, you've certainly developed a preliminary list of companies that you're targeting. Probably a lot of that input has come from internal sources, such as the sales department, product management, other marketing activities that you've done. And so you've come up with a list, and for the sake of discussion today, we'll say 100. You got 100 on the list. Frankly, a bit more than that is going to be hard for ABM. And you really want to spend your money wisely. There's no question about that these days. And so you really want to try to focus in on those companies that are initially on your list that would be more likely to buy than others. You're really looking for companies that more fit the opportunity that you're going to offer them than the ones that maybe don't. Excuse me. Intent data is a new source of that. And one of my fellow friends from IBM, John Stennett, is here with us today, and he's from TechTarget. Frankly, that's a great source of indication of somebody's interest. And I would suggest that you talk to TechTarget if you're looking for intent data. Also, what you're really looking to do here is you're looking to make a decision on the initial preliminary list as to who's in, a little sinus trouble today, sorry folks, who's in and who's out on that list. You really want to focus in on the ones that are the best opportunities and not just because they're on the list. So let's start with information sources on companies. You're looking for soft and hard data, information that would tend to qualify them as the best targets. Obviously, the website of the company and Google are an obvious first check on that. We have our traditional sources such as Hoover's and D&B, and OneSource gets you the SIC codes, the size, et cetera. Those are the firmographic, demographic pieces of information. But then there's some other pieces of information that might be called soft data. This is basically what's going on in the company and or the industry. If you're looking at the industry, I would suggest IBIS World. IBIS World is, in fact, an Australian-based company, but they have a large presence here in the United States. And they do rather in-depth reports on industries and sometimes even going down to the 4-digit SIC code. Also, the Global 5000 database, Harry Henry, I believe, is on the phone today. He runs that firm. And this is a chance for you to see the footprint of these companies, maybe more than just the U.S., maybe they're international. So that's a good source of data. Also, those people that know Factiva and LexisNexis. Factiva is a division of Dow Jones. And they, both of these firms gather from approximately 10,000 data sources, all kinds of information about companies. There are subscription fees, but it's good to be on them. And you can, say if you're targeting Xerox as an example, you put Xerox in and you're going to come up with a whole lot of information that comes into you from about Xerox, their annual reports, PR releases, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, the inside view. I think a lot of people on the phone today are familiar with inside view. Okay, next. Now you've got company information, and that should be on your database, obviously. Now we're looking for individual contacts within a company. As we like to say sometimes, you don't sell anything to companies, you sell things to people. And it's the people within the company that you're looking for. Now, this is not the buyer's journey. This is outlining the buying tree. Who are the individuals that are likely to be engaged in the buying decision? Again, this is the first step in that process. This is not the buying process, the whole buying process. It's the first step. You need to get basically an initial interest, initial engagement. Now, in theory, ABM targets larger firms, right? So guess what? You're not going after the senior level executives. These are not the people that are going to respond to you and get you engaged in the lead process. It's going to be the other people that are 2 or 3 or sometimes even 4 levels down. So ask yourself these questions. Who will use the product or service or software that you're selling? So it's the users, and typically the users are way down the chain. Who has the money decision? Who is going to be the economic buyer, as sometimes we like to say? And that person obviously has some kind of financial background or financial title. Now, a quick comment here. I've seen this mistake made by a number of companies where they forget about purchasing. They don't somehow feel that purchasing is important at this stage of the game. And in some companies, it is. As an example, years ago when I was in sales, I used to call on 3M up in Minneapolis. And I'll tell you something, you would get nowhere within 3M if you didn't go through the purchasing department. And we're talking about, they had interest in a certain product or service. So don't forget purchasing here in the money decision. Also, who else is impacted by usage? Who is going to be concerned or involved in the usage of the product? Now, I have a quick hospital example here. It's a company, Square D, that was selling reserve generators to hospitals just in case the power went out. And I think the people in Rhode Island are suffering from that right now from the ice storm they got the other day. And here's the decision tree for the hospital. Obviously, the primary person was the facilities manager, the individual who was responsible for managing the facility at the hospital. And then there was an economic decision. Generators are not cheap. And so therefore, there was a CFO or some kind of financial executive involved. But guess what? There was one that was sort of hidden. When you began to dig into it, you found it. That individual was the risk manager. If electricity in a hospital goes out and somebody's on the operating table, you've got some real risk. So we targeted the risk manager as well as the CFO and the plant facilities manager. Then think about the function first and then titles. Titles have gotten crazy these days. I know one. I met recently a guy from a small company here in Phoenix, and he gave me his card, and under his card, the word was gopher. And I said, well, what do you do with the company? He says, well, I go for this and I go for that. Well, he really was the president of the company. So be careful with titles. Think function first, and then try to match up the titles that match to the function. I know a company in Colorado that has cataloged over 400,000 titles in the U.S. So that gives you an idea of the depth of titles. Personas help, but when you start to drill down to individuals, sometimes the persona that you've developed falls apart. So be a little careful using personas for ABM. You're really talking to individuals here. Obviously, firm size matters. You want to go deep in an organization with ABM. These are numbers from the various sources, but in medium-sized firms, it's generally considered that there are 3 to 8 people involved in the decision. And in larger firms, 8 to 13 or even more. When I was at IBM, we actually felt there were 22 people involved in buying technology at a large organization. So go deep. Next. Here's a list that I stole from Marketing Charts. For those people that haven't get the subscription, it's really interesting. Every day or two, you're going to get an email from them, and they're going to have a different chart. This one was recent, and it's a survey based on 175 marketing people, and they said, what data sources do you use? Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these. You'll see at the top is Zoom Info, who we'll refer later as well. And some logical names here, and maybe some names that are new to you. Since you'll be getting copies of the deck, you'll be able to look at these a little more carefully. So these are the popular data providers from a recent survey. Next. But let's talk about data sources that are appropriate for ABM. The depth of contact data is the key for ABM. It's not the senior level executives, but it's the depth. How many people do they have for each company? Be aware of the thing that burns us a lot, which is data decay. It's really scary, but the reality is that on a business card, between 60 and 70% of people have one or more changes on their business card in a 12-month period. Now that's scary. If it's 60%, that's 5% a month. That also applies to your own database, by the way. So you got to be aware that data decay is a problem that we're going to continue to work with, and that's one of the things you got to check on the list that you use. So therefore, I recommend strongly that you test a sample to verify accuracy. For any vendor that you're looking to use on data, you want to maybe get a sample. I won't use a statistical analysis here, but you need at least 10, 20, or 30, more like 30 verifications to get a sense of how accurate the data is. You're looking for 3 contact points in the data. Obviously, the address of the company, if you want to make a mailing, and then the email and phone. Email. Now, I don't know why it is, but email seems to be a state secret these days. If you call up a company and ask for the email of, say, Joe Smith, they won't give it to you. And just as a fun thing, I don't know if you saw it this Christmas season, but there was a repartee between a guy and a woman, and she was talking to the guy about sending letters to Santa. And he said, well, you do still send letters? She says, oh, no, I email them now. And then he asked her, he said, well, would you share the email address with me? And she said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So that's what we run into a lot. For some reason, people think it's a state secret. But now, some new data sources or data sources for ABM, our sponsor. I'm going to recommend them highly. And I checked them out. And I checked, one of the first things I did when I started to work with Sales Intel was I said, well, there's a big company here in Phoenix called Avnet. Most people know Avnet. And I checked a list of people that they have within Avnet, and there were like over 2,000 people that they had at Avnet. And I figured, well, boy, oh boy, that's for ABM. Zoom Info is a good one. There's another company that's fairly new, Synthio, Discover.org. Most people are familiar with that, Inside View. And then a company called Lead Genius. My old friend, Jeff Kostermans, who I may be on the webinar today, joined them recently. And this is a company that will actually take your target audience and then develop a database for you based on your criteria. So that's sort of a reverse way to get the in-depth database. And for those who don't know, here's a good tip. If you like to look broadly at lists that are available, go to www.nextmark.com. It's basically Google for list. You put in your keyword or your key phrase, and up will pop the list that match that. This is a broad list approach, but it's something that many people don't know about. Okay, next. Just a word, a little bit about hierarchy of data and building a database in the B2B world. Those of you who took psychology in college are familiar with Maslow, hierarchy of needs. So I sort of stole the word hierarchy from Maslow. And basically, this is a hierarchy of B2B data. At the base is the firmographic or demographic information of the company. Obviously, the SIC code, their size, their revenue, all of those kinds of factual things. And then on top of that, you want to build your contact list of individuals within the company. And if you're building a database, it obviously is going to be for customers as well. So there might be, some transactional data there, things that have been bought in the past. You could tie that to individuals, that's even better. Then there's behavioral data, people that came to your trade show booth, came to a webinar like today, did something that tipped them off, they're interested. And then as we mentioned earlier, there's now the intent data that's on top. Here's the point, start at the bottom and move up. Don't start at the top and move down. The database must be built from the firmographic and demographic level up. Okay, next. So now let's talk about the campaign and how you want to engage these people and get response. We've talked about the data, but when I develop a direct marketing campaign, there are 4 elements that are in this campaign. The first, and you'll see the numbers beside them, is the percent or the leverage on success, is the data. And we've talked about data, but it's the most important element in a campaign. Sometimes us direct marketers like to say, a great campaign sent to a lousy list will not do as well as a lousy campaign sent to a great list. So really work on your data. It will pay off. The second element in a campaign is the offer for response, ringing in at 20 to 30% of success. The media sequence and frequency, another 20 to 30%, so it's as equally important as offer. And then when I give seminars in the public domain, I make sure I know where the creative people are sitting, because when I then use this statistic, I begin to duck because I know things will be thrown at me. And I said creative is only 10 to 20%. Now that does not say it's important. It's not important. It is. But compared to the other elements, it has a less important in B2B. In consumer, it's more important. So we're going to dive into those 3 additional elements of the campaign. And the first one is offer strategy. And this is the what's in it for me. Why should I respond? Well, you're asking me to get engaged, but why? Now, we all know that content marketing has taken over the day here. Content Marketing Institute in Cleveland. Joe Polsey is an old friend of mine and a former Browns fan or a current Browns fan. And so you now can feel sorry for us both. But Joe's recently sold Content Marketing Institute. But really what it's all about is that you need to be offering information of real value. I'm talking about real value here to the recipient, not to you, real value to the recipient. And that generally focuses around the need or the problem that your product, service, or software solves. Now, let's go a little bit further into offer strategies. There's a tendency we all have, I think, to offer one thing. And in the ABM lead generation process, we're thinking offers that would be at the top of the funnel, the beginning offers. But at the other side of that is the buyer. You may not know that the buyer is well down the road in terms of buying something that would be equivalent to your product, service, or software. So you might want to think about another offer that is further down the buying process, let's say in the middle, and say it could be a demo. It could be some form of other engagement that is a little bit more involving or a little bit higher commitment, and offer both of those at the same time. Depending on what they respond to, they are in essence self-qualifying themselves as to where they are in the buying process. Now, sometimes people get a little carried away with that strategy and they offer more than 2, no more than 3 though. We know from direct marketing statistics that more than 3 offers confuses people. So my recommendation would be to stick to 2. Get 2 clear offers that are related to 2 stages of the buying process, and then see which ones they respond to. If they respond to both, take them at the most senior level, at the most serious level. And I also recommend when you give offers like this, that on the offer response page, put a box that says no interest, and then put some reasons why. Back in the days of my sales life, It was generally, we called things a trial close. A trial close was when you asked for the order and they said no, and then you said, well, why? And then that sort of flushed out the reasons or the objections that you had to deal with. This is another very good piece of information that you might get from someone as to why they're not interested. Then you can use that information and, frankly, to develop another campaign. Now, another tip on offer strategies is, and we do this all the time, every day of the week, we fulfill offers on digital. We send the white paper, the blog, the whatever it is, the report digitally, and people download it. But I'm going to say something now that probably goes against the grain of some people, and that is, why not also, not as a substitute, but also deliver that white paper report in hard copy in the mail. You may not even tell them that it's coming, but there are a couple reasons that you want to do this. A lot of times you download a white paper and you never read it. It stays in the download file forever. So the offer strategy, and I get calls all the time, well, we know you downloaded the white paper and I haven't even read it yet, or maybe never will. So if you deliver a hard copy of that, you can make the individual at least tactile. It's a tactile touch here, and it's going to be more engaging, and they're going to probably have to take a look at it a little bit better than they did on the download version. Also, another advantage here is that you can put something else in the mailing package, something else that might be appropriate for that individual you're targeting. Okay, next. Now let's get into media sequence and frequency. In the world of direct marketing that I live in, there's 3 primary media. There's email, mail, and phone. But I'm going to add LinkedIn here. We have found through several experiments and testing that if you connect to the individual with LinkedIn before the campaign, response rates go up. And here's a word to the wise: be careful. LinkedIn is not a community of people that are looking to be sold. So in your LinkedIn message, if someone allows you to connect with them, don't sell. Maybe announce that something's coming to them in the mail, or do some other kind of messaging. Don't try to sell on LinkedIn. People get a little upset with that. It's not the reason that they're on LinkedIn. Then let's talk about direct mail, the comeback of direct mail. And this is true. Response rates are going up. Engagement rates are going up. Direct mail is really making a comeback. And we're talking about direct mail all the way from postcards to impact mailing. My friends out there in Carlsbad, California at Modern Postcard are great people to work with. They're actually maybe Jeannie is on the phone today, I believe. And I want to recommend them highly as people to work with to do, and they do more than postcards, but postcards work really well for certain products or services. And also all the way, obviously the letter packages are very important in direct mail. By the way, the highest opening rate of a direct mail letter is a number 10 envelope, live stamp, first class stamp, no barcodes, personally addressed with your company logo in the upper left. That's the highest opening rate and still is. But let's talk about impact mailings, because at ABM, your real problem is, how do I break through the clutter? In fact, stealing a phrase from Ford some years ago, it's marketing job 1, how to break through the clutter. Now, we sometimes call impact mailings 3D, or sometimes I say something goes bump in the mail. It's not a flat piece of mail. Now, they work extremely well for initial ABM contacts. Obviously, the budget should allow it, because you're really talking about, my guess is, something that is relatively high in revenue and high in margin on the B2B side. And so what you want to do is you want to break through the clutter, and there's no better way than break through the clutter with something that goes bump in the mail. And when I say bump, I'm really talking about a box or something that is significant. They should be, though, the items that you choose to go in the mailing piece should be relevant in some fashion to your product, service, need, something about in the industry maybe. I'm working with a company in Colorado now, and it's a data analytics firm. And we're talking about doing a clutter bus mailing, an impact mailing piece. And one of the items we're going to probably be mailing is an abacus, sort of making the analogy to, if you're on Excel, you're still on the abacus world. You ought to advance a little bit. Another quick example is years ago, I did a program for a software company selling call center software. The salespeople said, we need to get appointments at these large accounts. We can't crack in. And when I was talking to one of the VP of sales, they used the phrase, we just can't get our shoe in the door. Well, I sort of went back to the office and began thinking about that phrase. And so the impact mailing piece that we sent in a FedEx package was one Johnson Murphy shoe. And in the shoe was a letter. And rather tongue-in-cheek, the letter started out with, Dear Mr. Smith, you're probably wondering why we sent the shoe to you. Well, we've been having a tough time getting the foot in the door and to see you, and we thought this might be the next best chance or opportunity or whatever. It was very successful. We also promised, by the way, that if we showed up for the appointment and the letter was signed by the individual salesperson, that we would give this individual a pair of these shoes in their size. So there was quite an incentive for them to say yes. As you might imagine, it was a very successful program. I've written a white paper on impact mailings and also did a podcast not too long ago for Inside Sales. You can email me if you'd like, and I'll send you the white paper on impact mailings with a lot more examples and some other tips as well. Now, if you can't find a item that is relevant, that makes some sense, then I have a fallback for you. And it's a wonderful fallback. It's send some brownies through the mail. I don't know who doesn't like brownies. Everybody seems to like. I guess I found one person not too long ago that didn't like brownies, but that's 1 in a million maybe. And so what I basically do with the brownie program is I send brownies in Fairy Tale Brownies, a company out here in Arizona called, and you can get to their website by going to brownies.com, has a corporate program. And they'll put your logo on the box, and so you can use it as an impact mailing piece. And obviously the letter, sort of tongue-in-cheek, says, you're probably wondering why we sent these brownies to you. Well, while you're enjoying one, read the letter. So it sort of works for anything you want to sell. Any product, service, or software, brownies work. And so I'd highly recommend using Fairy Tale Brownies for that, if in fact you can't find another item that is relevant to what you want to communicate. Okay, next. Email. Oh boy, this is what we overuse. And I know it's standard media. It's easy. It's cheap. We can do it multiple times. Develop a direct mail program sometimes takes a number of weeks to get it all done and in the shop. So email is really the default communication method, and it works. But it doesn't work as well when you're talking to someone that hasn't developed a relationship with you. I got the statistic the other day that it takes between 10 and 14 emails to a cold prospect before you get a response. Now, that's a lot of emails to one person. By the time you get a response, they might not be very happy with you. So obviously, email is the other media that we use in direct marketing, very powerful, but also it's the clutter is just immense, and I know we all know about it. Phone, obviously, is the third. It's powerful because it's a voice message and should be used right. Generally, you're going to be leaving a message these days on the voicemail. And I have a word to the wise here. Be careful in B2B about using ACDs, which are automatic call distributors. You're on an ACD call when you answer the phone and there's a pause. And then the person comes on the phone. That's an ACD call. Also, recently, there's been a company that has been promoting with some success, I think, using the local phone numbers to sort of trick the person into answering the phone because, hey, it's a local number. I don't recommend this in B2B, and the reason is because you just don't want to trick people. I've been tricked a couple times, and you don't want to start off on the wrong foot. You want to start off on the right foot. And so using ACDs and local phone numbers can be irritating to some, and I would recommend you stay away from it. But on the other side of the equation, it takes some time to get a response, even when voicemails are left. 8 messages on average need to be left before a response is given. And so you can't give up. You've got to keep going. But be careful now that you leave a message that is good and it doesn't annoy people. I've also written a white paper on this as well with regards to how to leave good voicemail messages. They have a context to them, and there's a lot of information about that on the web. Okay, now having said of all those individual media, let's talk about the reality. Reality is that the best results from direct marketing campaigns of this nature in the ABM side are a result of multimedia, multi-touch. What we really mean is that you use multimedia, mail, email, phone. Obviously, I've recommended LinkedIn a little bit. And you go after it with a multi-touch. These are the best results. These kind of campaigns are best in terms of response rates. Now, the traditional sequence is email, mail, and phone. You might say that's a sort of a traditional sequence because of cost. Email is less costly. Mail is obviously a little bit more. And phone, finally, obviously is more costly. But it's not always the best. So you want to mix it up for your marketplace. As an example, if you're going after engineers, that's a little different mix than you're going after middle-level executives in, say, the marketing department. So frequency is good. Don't give up. I typically hear from salespeople that say, "Well, you know, I called the guy twice and he didn't call me back." Well, you got to be more on target than that. You got to be more frequent than that. And so frequency is good. Don't give up, but also don't be annoying. Next. A couple creative tips here. The three relevancies I talk about, the three R's, you know, the old real estate thing: location, location, location. This is sort of a takeoff on that. This is relevancy, relevancy, and relevancy. And what you're really trying to do is find something that is relevant. Here's the magic equation. The higher the degree of relevancy, the higher the engagement and response rate. Proven time and time again. Now, you hear that and you say, okay, great. Relevant to what? Well, you've got company information now. You've done your research. Relevant to something happened in the company. Merger, new product introduction. A lot of different things you could use there. Relevant to the individual. You found out something about the individual. Now, we're not talking about personal things here. We're talking about something, you know, with regards to the position's function, possibly something that's going on in the industry that they ought to know about. So relevant to the individual. And then finally, relevant to the assumed need. Now, assumed need I stole from my days in sales training. We used to, in counselor selling models, we used to assume a need and then form our questions based on the assumed need. And you can do that as well based on the person's function within the organization. Assume a need that they might have, and that should be relevant to them. Now, you now have to then sit down at a blank computer screen these days and write copy. Maybe you're not writing copy, but you're helping people write the copy. It's not like normal copy. It's not like advertising copy. It is different. It is conversational. It is not, you might say, perfect English either. And just recently, Tim Reister, a very smart guy, came out with a study that said using the word you is better than using the word we. Again, that's sort of a tip, a creative tip there. But direct marketing copy is something you have to learn how to do. I also recommend strongly the strategy of straight talk. Disarm people by telling them what they're thinking. It sort of gets under their, gets into their brain a little bit. There are many books on DM copy. When I learned to write copy, I used to go to the webinars given by Herschel Gordon Lewis and others that were very good at that. But unfortunately, any of those gentlemen are retired or passed away. But I would recommend strongly that you tap into Bob Bly at rwbly.com because Bob, in my opinion, is the leading copywriter in the B2B world today. And he has a lot of information. He's written number of books. I think it's getting close to 100 now. And he offers a whole lot of good information, both free and for a small fee. And then finally, a creative tip. Many times when you begin to communicate to someone, you're not really trying to sell against competition. You're not really trying to sell against avoided a need that exists. It's not been filled by something. You're really trying to sell against the current solution or the status quo. And what you really have to convince the individual to do is come up with a reason to change. Now, there may be a lot of reasons for your product or service to be better than the status quo, but position against the status quo. We all have more projects than we can do these days, and what you're really asking a person to do is put another project on his project list, and that would be sometimes difficult unless they're convinced that they need to change from the status quo. Okay, next. So here we are at the end of the webinar. Obviously, if you do ABM right, there are many benefits. It aligns sales and marketing, which is the thing we've been trying to do for decades. And this magically puts the sales and marketing team on the same page. Clearly, if you're going to be going after companies that the salespeople want to sell, you're making a friend among the salespeople. You're going to increase your marketing and sales ROE. Now, notice I use the word RO or abbreviation ROE, which stands for return on expense. We misuse the word ROI so frequently because it's really not an ROI. When we talk about it, it's really how much money are we getting back, how much revenue are we getting back based on the expense of the marketing program. If you talk to a sophisticated financial person and you say ROI, they have a whole different formula that you use. So I use ROE. A new and powerful outbound lead generation option, yes, it is, but don't forget the other ones you're using. So it should be combined with your other programs. The real issue here is, what is the balance between your outbound lead generation activities and your inbound lead generation activities? You have to determine that balance and budget accordingly. Magically, it also elevates marketing's role and importance within the organization. The closer you get to revenue, the better you're going to be within your importance in the organization. And now you're really working with the sales department on real revenue. And also, clearly, it might elevate your career. And then finally, sort of a tease here, it sets up the next level. Being an old salesperson, this whole thing, account-based marketing, really started back in the 1960s, and it used to be called national account management. And so I'm going to suggest that this strategy of getting an in-depth database on a firm and then using that database to communicate is even more valuable on the current customer base. Salespeople are having an increasingly difficult time these days to see people, to see the right people and all the people within the organization. So take the same kind of strategy and apply it to the current account base, and you'll be even a better hero than before. Okay, contact me for more white papers if you'd like on B2B marketing. I've got a whole bunch. My website, unfortunately, is under redesign right now. Should be up soon. And at the end of the Q&A, I believe there'll be my email address, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jason, for Q&A.
Great. Thanks so much, John. Obviously, we've run a few minutes over from our allotted time, but for those of you who are still with us, want to open it up for any questions that anybody has. And then while we wait for any of those, John, you've had a few little anecdotes, but what are some of the most powerful lessons that you've learned here recently?
It's not recently, but one of the more powerful lessons I've learned in my work in B2B over the years is that if you talk to someone with regards to their interest in your product or service, and they're not interested today, that doesn't mean they won't be interested in the future. A whole process is developed around that. It's called lead nurturing, and so you want to keep with people because you never know when something changes. When something breaks, or when a new executive comes in and changes the game. So my word to the wise is that if you've got a company that is good for you, you feel like you should be selling them, they have the right characteristics, don't give up. Keep going, because you never know when something changes in that organization, and that they then will be far more interested than they have been in the past.
No, it's great. I think that speaks a lot to what you had mentioned earlier, which was, we're sort of back to marketing 101, where content is king, and you need value add content to get people to engage in the first place and break through the clutter. But the added advantage of if you're constantly refreshing and creating a value add content library, is that gives you what I like to refer to jokingly in marketing as non-creepy excuses to reach back out to people. So they may have passed for the time being, they may have not been a fit, or they may have not been the right decision maker. But if you're continuing to create that value add content, then that gives them additional opportunities to be able to engage, keep you top of mind, so that whenever they are ready for those conversations, that's been maintained over that time.
Yeah, it also does something else too. It builds your brand awareness by multiple contacts like that. And many times the people you're talking to don't know who you are. You're not necessarily a named company like an IBM.
Yeah, exactly. It allows you to be able to distinguish yourself as a thought leader in the space, and as somebody that's actually adding value to, as opposed to just sending sales and marketing pitches to them around a product or a service. Cool. Well, obviously we're a fair ways over. I don't see any additional questions from anybody right now. Like I said, we will be sending out an email blast with a link to both the deck that we've used, as well as the recording of the webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, John, for joining us. This was extremely informative, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day.